Welcome viewers, this is a new program on the unit 2 of your course Business Economics, wherein part 1 relates to elasticity of demand. You may recall that in the previous 3 programs of unit 1, we have been talking about introduction of economy, basic problems of an economy and role of price mechanism in solving some of those problems. Now, we turn our attention to all important topic of elasticity of demand. As we have been discussing previously, price plays a very important role, and we have seen that with respect to changes in price, demand also changes. Here it will be pertinent if we start first about taking a look at what is demand and how it is generated, what factors are influencing demand. Then we will discuss law of demand. We will also discuss the concept of utility very briefly. Then we will shift to elasticity of demand. We will talk about 3 types of elasticity, namely the price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and finally the cross elasticity of demand. So, then first of all, when we talk about demand, then we find that demand is most fundamental to the subject of business economics, because if demand is not there, then rest of the economic activities will not take place. Demand of any product, any commodity depends upon so many factors. First and foremost, it depends upon price being charged of that product. Second is the income of the members of economy. Third is the price of relative goods. Fourth is the price of substitute products or price of complement products also. These factors influence the demand of any particular product. As has been said, price and income definitely has direct bearing on the changing pattern of demand. As far as the consumer tastes and preferences are concerned, changes in them also cause changes in demand. Regarding price of related products, we see that if any particular product is having some price, then how it will affect the price of another product and in turn the demand for that particular product. Once again, we find that the price of products also affects, because if the price of a particular product is high and the price of its substitute product is low, then the demand for substitute product will be more than the demand for that product whose price is high. Similarly, there are some products which are complementary to this particular product, and so the price of both the product and the complementary product are interrelated, and in the same way their demands are also related. So, I think that you have understood what is meant by demand and what are the factors which cause changes in the demand pattern. Now, let us turn our attention to law of demand. Law of demand very categorically specifies if price falls, demand rises, and vice versa, that is if price rises, demand falls, with the assumption that other thing being held constant. This law of demand tells us about the direction. That means that in which direction the relationship between demand and price is moving, but it does not tell us the magnitude. It does not tell us by how much amount this one change in one is affecting the change in other. Therefore, it will be pertinent for us to discuss this particular topic of your syllabus, that is elasticity of demand. Now, elasticity of demand as a concept is described as the responsiveness of one variable to changes in other. For example, if we are talking about price elasticity of demand, then we are trying to find out how responsive is, say, our demand with regard to changes in its price. When price rises, what happens to demand? Does it fall? Does it remain the same? Does it rise? Of course, the last option being very rare. How much changes in demand? If it change, then what is the degree of that change? Whether it is less or whether it is more. So, in other words, we can say elasticity measures the extent to which demand will change consequent upon change in the price, for example. So, friends, this is the basic concept of elasticity, that how responsive one variable to changes in the other variables, one by one of course, and then how demand will fluctuate with regard to consequent changes in the price. As I have already said, there are three basic types of elasticity. The first one is price elasticity of demand. The second one is income elasticity of demand. Third one is cross elasticity of demand. One by one, we will be talking about these three types of elasticities. First of all, we are talking about price elasticity of demand. Here, we are trying to see how much responsive is demand to changes in price. In other words, we can say percentage change in demand, is it greater than percentage change in price? If that is the case, that for the relatively less change in price, there is great change in demand, then we will say that demand is highly responsive or rather highly sensitive to small changes in price, and in that case it will be considered as elastic. The situation of demand being more elastic will arise. Thirdly, where percentage change in demand is less than percentage change in price, means for greater change in price there is significantly less change in demand. In such a situation, it will be considered that demand is inelastic. As we have been talking about, that law of demand only tells us the direction. It is the concept of elasticity which tells us the measurement or rather the magnitude. Let us see that how this elasticity can be measured. Remember, friends, we are talking about price elasticity of demand. So, therefore, you see that EP, where P stands for price. So, EP refers to the price elasticity of demand, and the formula given is EP is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. So, when we find that this particular ratio tells us about the elasticity of demand with respect to prices. Now, if the answer is between 0 and -1, the relationship is inelastic. Now, this is very interesting to note that this minus sign here before price elasticity of demand, because as price rises, demand falls and vice versa. That means that when the price falls, demand rises, meaning thereby both price and demand, they move in opposite direction. So, in order to indicate this change, minus sign is included here, but at the same time a particular caution should be made that this minus sign is only denoting the direction. As far as the magnitude is concerned, that magnitude is represented by the absolute value of the elasticity of demand. When we take up some of the numericals, then this point will be further clearer to you. On the other hand, the same EP, which is measured in terms of percentage change in demand divided by percentage change in price, if the answer is between -1 and infinity, that means that if there is percentage change in demand is much higher than percentage change in price, then in that particular case we find that there is elasticity of demand is very high. And once again the same explanation that this -1 we are talking about because of the opposing nature of the movement of price and demand. So, friends, it has been made clearer to you that law of demand tells us about the direction, and the elasticity concept of elasticity of demand tells us about the magnitude of these changes, and this is in the form of a ratio where we are trying to see the percentage change in demand with reference to percentage change in price we are trying to observe, because we are discussing price elasticity of demand. So, in other words, we can say that if the EP is less than 1, now we are not putting the minus sign in order to accentuate only the absolute value or the magnitude of the elasticity, then it will be inelastic situation. If EP is, that is price elasticity of demand, is greater than 1, then it will be elastic situation. If EP is equal to 1, then it will be unitary elastic demand. Then this elasticity of demand is judged in relative terms mainly. That means that relatively more inelastic or relatively more elastic. But then let us now turn our attention to two more types of elasticity of demand. One is perfect elastic demand and second one is perfect inelastic demand. As far as the perfect elastic demand is concerned, we find that is where we have the changes in demand are of much higher level for significantly less change in price. So, if we take a look at the graph, we find that price on the y axis, quantity on the x axis, and a line parallel to the x axis, which is starting from 0 and then going towards infinity on the right hand direction. That line parallel to x axis is denoting the perfect elastic situation, wherein quantity demanded is increasing greatly with respect to very insignificant change in price of the product. On the other hand, if we have to take an example of perfectly inelastic demand, then we find that for the changes in price from one level to another, even if there may be great changes in the price level, the demand of the product remains the same. So, in this curve we find that the demand is shown as parallel to the y axis. That means that the change in demand is negligible with regard to significant change in the price level. So, friends, we have been talking about price elasticity of demand. We have also been talking about different types of price elasticity of demand, namely perfectly elastic demand. I have given an example of a line which is parallel to the x axis as the example of perfectly elastic demand, perfectly inelastic demand as the line parallel to the y axis as the example of perfectly inelastic demand. We have also seen relatively elastic demand, and we have also seen relatively inelastic demand. There also, when EP was 1, then we have talked about unit elastic demand. Now, there are, for different products, this elasticity of demand behaves in a different manner. We can take example of some of the essential products, such as edible products, eatable products. Let us say examples of products like wheat or rice or grams, or for example, some of the spices, particularly salt, etc., in which what is happening is that even if the price being charged is much higher or it undergoes significant changes, the demand for these products will not change as much. Even if the price being charged becomes considerably higher, the demand for those products will not go down considerably lower. This is an example of some of the necessities of our life, in which the demand does not respond very sensitively to the changes in price, and thereby in such cases the inelastic demand exists. As far as some other consumer products are concerned, where more substitute products are possible, where competition is of very high level, there we find that if there is a small change in price, the demand pattern undergoes great change, because there are alternative products and the consumers may shift their preference from the product which is charging them high price to a substitute product which is equally good but charging lower price. So, that way we will see demand pattern undergoing lot of changes. So, the second example is that of relatively more elastic demand with regard to changes in price. I think that with these examples, the concept of price elasticity of demand has been made amply clear to all of you. Now, we shall try and take some of the numerical examples to illustrate the point that we have been trying to make here. For the purpose of illustration, in order to make you understand the concept of price elasticity of demand in a better manner, let us take the help of a numerical example. Suppose the price of a product falls from rupees 10 per unit to rupees 9 per unit, meaning thereby that the change in the price is to the tune of 1 rupees per unit. And due to this change, consequently, quantity demanded of the product increases from 100 units, which were earlier being demanded, to 120 units being demanded now. Now, we have to find out the price elasticity of demand. This simple numerical explains to you the working of price elasticity of demand, the formula that we have been discussing earlier. Now, change in price, which is denoted as delta P, is actually original price rupees 10 minus changed price rupees 9 is equal to rupee 1 per unit, while the original price remains rupees 10 per unit. As far as change in quantity, which is denoted by delta D, is 120 units now being demanded minus 100 units originally demanded. So, therefore, 20 units are being demanded nowadays. So, then we make use of the formula of the elasticity of demand with respect to prices, and the formula that we are making use of is delta Q upon delta P multiplied by P upon Q, where delta Q refers to change in demand, delta P refers to change in price, P refers to the original price, Q refers to the original demand. When we substitute the values here, we find that delta Q is equal to 20, delta P is equal to 1, P 10 rupees the original price, original quantity Q being demanded 100 units. When we replace these values in this formula, then we find that 20 upon 1 multiplied by 10 upon 100, and we come to the conclusion that the price elasticity of demand in this case is 2 units. So, then we know that the demand is elastic to the changes in the price level. If we take other examples, then we find that the price elasticity of demand is also measured in terms of the total revenue, wherein when we try to compute the total revenue, then we try to see what is the resultant effect of the changes in the demanded quantity on the total revenue of the product. As you know very well that total revenue is obtained by whatever the quantity which is being sold and whatever the price being charged, the multiplication of the two gives us the total revenue to be earned by an organization from the sale of that particular product. In order to illustrate this particular aspect of the total revenue method, now let us take another example, which is like this, that suppose price of a good falls from rupees 10 per unit to rupees 8 per unit. Consequently, quantity demanded increases from 80 units to 100 units. Now, how can we comment about price elasticity of demand when we consider the total revenue method? The solution of this problem is like that when we have been charging the price of rupees 10 per unit, the quantity demanded is 80. So, therefore, the revenue is price rupees 10 per unit multiplied by quantity demanded 80 units, and therefore, the total revenue will be rupees 800. Now, we take the changed scenario. In this case, the price has been decreased from rupees 10 to rupees 8 per unit, but at the same time quantity demanded has increased from 80 units to 100 units. Now, let us see what is the position with regard to total revenue. Now, the new price is rupees 8 per unit, but the quantity demanded has increased from 80 to 100. So, new quantity demanded is 100 units. Therefore, total revenue will be again 8 into 100 rupees 800. In this manner, we see that even though with the changes in price, demand has shown significant change, but when we consider the total revenue method, then we find that there is no difference or no effect on the total revenue earned by the organization. So, sometimes we have to take this view also, and we may have to calculate price elasticity of demand by the total revenue method also. So, you have seen that in this particular case, the changes in the price do not have the consequent changes in the total revenue. However, they had changes in the demand level. Lastly, we want to discuss two more types of price elasticity of demand. One is called arc elasticity, other is called point elasticity. As far as arc elasticity of demand is concerned, it is calculated at two levels of demand curve. So, between these 2 points, how elastic the demand is, that is reflected in arc elasticity. As far as the point elasticity is concerned, we consider and we calculate only the elasticity of demand at one particular point of time only. Here we are trying to see that how the concept of price elasticity of demand plays an important role. The importance of price elasticity of demand is in terms of giving guidelines to the decision makers with regard to making a decision, particularly that how to determine the prices of their products. So, we find that if the market is highly sensitive to changes in the price level, meaning thereby that the price elasticity of demand is very high and therefore elastic, then the marketers should be very cautious about bringing about changes in the price of particular product. So, in other words, we can say the overall pricing strategy of the companies is decided if we have the knowledge about the price elasticity of demand. Friends, so far we have been talking about the concept of demand, what are the various factors which influence the demand. We have also talked about the concept of utility as the want satisfying power of a product. We should always be considering utility when talking about demand. Then we discussed that law of demand only gives us the direction, while the magnitude of the changes is given by the elasticity of demand. As it was discussed that 3 types of elasticity of demand are there: the price elasticity, income elasticity and cross elasticity. In this particular program, we have focused our attention on the price elasticity of demand, and therein we have discussed various options available, various possibilities of whether the demand is perfectly elastic or perfectly inelastic, or relatively elastic or relatively inelastic, or unitary elastic when the EP was equal to 1. Then we have taken some of the numerical examples to illustrate the working of the price elasticity of demand. We find that if there is significant change in the demand level with respect to small changes in the price level, then it is considered to be highly elastic, and the marketers should be cautious about manipulating different price levels. We have also taken into consideration the price elasticity of demand by the total revenue method, and the example we had taken has amply illustrated that even though the changes in price brought about changes in demand, but then consequently the total revenue remained the same in both the scenarios. So, sometimes we will have to consider this total revenue method also. Lastly, we have talked about the arc elasticity, wherein elasticity of demand is considered between any 2 points on the demand curve, and on the other hand the point elasticity when we are trying to see the elasticity of demand with respect to price on a single point. In the next program, we will be talking about the income elasticity of demand and also the cross elasticity of demand. As far as the cross elasticity is concerned, it will be the elasticity of changes in the demand of one particular product with regard to another related product. So, all these concepts taken together, this concept of elasticity of demand throws light on various important economic decisions as well as helps in formulation of economic policies also.